members of the IESL, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is certainly a pleasure to be here this morning to make a short intervention in your esteemed annual sessions. Your president asked me to speak a little about the challenges we face and plans we have on economic and social development in Sri Lanka. So I will take about 15 minutes to give you a quick summary of the key issues, but will restrict to the subject of economics given the limitation of time. I have a slide presentation. As background, we are all aware that Sri Lanka has historically performed very well in human development indicators, significantly ahead of its regional and low middle income colleagues and peers. So you see Sri Lanka, which is the dark line, is almost at hitting the margin of high. And if we continue this way, we will be in fact in the very high group in human development, which is in fact we are an outlier and can be compared with many other developed countries. We have almost $4,000 of per capita GDP, but if you convert this into what is called purchasing power parity adjusted GDP, which is what really matters because haircuts cost less here than in America, it is about $11,000, which is not really something that we should be too ashamed of. Our life expectancy is almost 75 years, more for women than for men. Adult literacy rate is around 93%. So these are all good indicators, and we should thank the policymakers from independence, particularly for free education and free health that has created the opportunity to achieve these important milestones. Now, if you look at growth, we can't be too happy about what we've been seeing. We have a low to moderate long-term growth rate. However, don't forget we had almost a 3-decade war ending in 2009. What we see is growth reached a peak post-war, and Sri Lanka experienced what some call a peace dividend. But it has proven unsustainable and actually full of what I call structural failings. If you see the circle after 2010, you'll see in 2012 we hit the highest growth rate this country has ever seen at 9.1%. But what you also see the following year, that it crashed to 3.5%. And then it kind of been hovering around 4.5%. And we are hoping that we will hit something close to 5% this year. Now, why is that? Why did it fall from 9 to 3.5? Why is it not sustained? There are many reasons, but some, as an economist, that I see very clearly is high internal orientation. What we call based on non-tradable activities, driven by high government infrastructure spending on commercial borrowing and worsening the country's debt position. If we are less open to the world, we become less competitive. We become inefficient. If we are more open to the world, we become more competitive and we become more efficient. So that is why countries that are globally oriented, countries that are integrated with the world, are generally statistically significantly more efficient and more competitive. Now I want to show you a slide, excuse me, perhaps as engineers who may not have necessarily seen. What this shows is our share of exports as a percentage of GDP. And this shows you the level of integration with the rest of the world. And keep in mind what I told you about increasing efficiencies and competitiveness as you integrate with the world. So if you go back to somewhere like 1990, this is a study done by Harvard University very recently, exports of goods and services as a percentage of GDP was about 30%. Now look, compared to India, China, Indonesia, Philippines, and CRI is Costa Rica, Thailand, Vietnam. We were pretty much in the league that was moving forward. In 2000, we did pretty well, 39% of GDP, and we were far ahead of India, China, India, China, and others. What happened in 2014? We lost out. From 39, we came down to 21. And our peers overtook us. Exports of other countries. Now, what you need to keep in mind is those countries that overtook us have a much larger internal markets, which means there is more scope for trade internally. You take a country like India, China, there are billions of people. Sri Lanka has only 20 million people. So we have to create that market. We don't have an internal market. It's about creating a global marketplace for Sri Lankan industry, Sri Lankan services, Sri Lankan producers. I will show you something else. And as technical people, as engineers, you will appreciate this slide. We are stuck in low complexity products. If you look at Sri Lanka, the first column, you see our exports are textiles and apparels and vegetables and fruits and things like that. You look at plastics and rubber, machinery and electrical, 4%, right? Other manufactured, 2%, chemical products, 2%, etc. And compare that, particularly the machinery and electrical, with our peers. We are significantly less. So the complexity of our exports is very low. And if you are trying to compete with the rest of the world, everyone's opening up, then we have to be complex in our exports. The reason why we need to have complexity in our exports is because it is easy for others to copy you if your product is not complex. You are stitching a shirt, it's not complex. You are stitching a pair of jeans, it's not complex. Anyone can do it. So what we are seeing is some of our exports, what we used to rely on earlier, have moved away from Sri Lanka and gone to other countries. But if your product is complex, it has technology, it has patented, it has some proprietary software, then it becomes very difficult to copy. Also, look at our diversification. Our exports have been generally stable. We've been producing and selling pretty much the same thing. We are kind of a old export country. We have hardly any new products that we have introduced into the marketplace, the global marketplace. We are still talking about apparels. Okay, there has been some technology improvements in apparels. I grant that. For instance, wearable technology, etc. Software has picked up, I grant that. But as a whole, they have still not made a significant impact in the diversification of our export basket. Compare this to this one, which is Thailand. In that blue section, you see how many new products Thailand has introduced as opposed to Sri Lanka. And if you look at the complexity of the Thai export basket, you will see that being reflected. So what needs to be done? If we are in the policy office and we see this question in front of us, the challenge we face. So, failure to attract transformational, knowledge-based private investments. And here it doesn't only mean foreign, local and foreign, due to what seems to be a kind of an anti-export bias and regulatory barriers, whether it be policy, whether it be tax, whether it be incentives, and so on, whether it is even perception, maybe misplaced perception. All these are creating a situation we are moving backwards. I was astonished to see that Sri Lanka's openness in terms of what our duties and tariffs are, and also in terms of private investment as a percentage of public investment in 2014, for which the data is available, most recent, was, believe me, exactly the same as 1970. 1970. So which means it has been a massive regression backwards to sort of being closed. And this data is available at the World Bank in their publicly available report. So now with graduation to the middle income status and rising wages, competing for cheap labor is no longer viable. And that we see, everybody is talking about it. IPS, Institute of Policy Studies, State of the Economy report in 2017 says, and I quote, "But the country also currently lacks a pool of professionals equipped with necessary technical skills to undertake complex and competitive economic activities." So there you are. You all are the cream of the professional society of this country. Everybody looks up to you. And then therefore, this must become a problem, a challenge that you need to take on and be able to come up with solutions together with the government and the private sector to overcome this challenge, because we cannot be stuck in where we are. So we propose this government's vision for what we call Vision 2025. Through this vision, we introduce the government's medium-term strategy to address these constraints and to try and make Sri Lanka an upper middle income country in the next 8 years. We will do this by transforming Sri Lanka into a knowledge-based, highly competitive social market economy. And I must here credit Honorable Patali, my friend, when we discussed this, and he insisted that we include in our policies that it has to be knowledge-based. And this is not now, I'm talking 2.5 years ago when we were discussing this. So that is really where we are headed. But saying these things is not enough. What is it that we are trying to do to make this possible? And this itself is not the complete picture. The next slide should be thought of together with the previous slide. Sri Lanka is and has been and will be a globally integrated nation during times of prosperity. Whether you go back to the days of the days of Parakram Bahu the Great, he was not only creating an agricultural economy, but he was also a trading post. We are ideally located. We are the center of the Indian Ocean. And Indian Ocean is where all economic activity is going to take place in the next 50 years. We have the opportunity to leverage a small, highly competitive, knowledge-based social market economy serving Asia as a center of the Indian Ocean. And I heard your president say about professional visas and free trade agreements and so on. Let me be very clear with you. At no point had the government ever said that there is automatic opening of Mode 4 in the ACTA. And I'm saying this with responsibility. And that Mode 4 is the movement of natural persons, which is independent professionals. Many engineer, architect, doctor, accountant, friends of mine have asked me, Harsha, is it true? I say, no, it is not true. There are perceptions, misplaced perceptions, that this country will suddenly become open and lorry loads and bus loads and ship loads of people will come and take our jobs. That is not true. If there is some need, then it can be discussed and limited opening can be done at the request of those, perhaps IESL or Architects Institute, so on and so forth. I just want to clarify that point. So, in addition to the macroeconomic, trade and factor market and regulatory reforms, we also plan to introduce several key initiatives in economic and social development fronts. Economic infrastructure. I'm not going to refer to any of those because I presume my colleague perhaps may talk about megapolis and CIFC, etc. But I will focus on this last slide again. Knowledge-based. Knowledge-based, highly competitive. So that is a strategy we have to adopt to beat the middle income trap and overcome the debt burden and free ourselves from the shackles of over-regulated, inefficient, low-tech, domestic-focused economic model we have been boxed into. I'm just going to give you one example. I looked at what we are spending money on, capital expenditure. And we said, let's look at education. What we found was 60 to 65% of expenditure was building buildings. We have very precious little capital expenditure, only $5 billion a year. And in education, most of it is going to build buildings, which is one time we have to pay for it and we use it for 10, 15, 25 years. So what we did was we did some numbers and we said, we will move building buildings from the government budget to the outside. Do on build, operate and transfer basis. We can rent purchase, we can lease purchase, we can securitize. Private sector can build buildings. They can build the labs. They can build the hostels. Why should we do it? Why are we spending our precious money in building buildings that the private sector can? So this is what I'm referring to. I call it moving money from bricks to microscopes. And if we can move, get this number, 40%, only 40% of building buildings away from the government's budget into BOT, we would save from the requested expenditure, which they didn't get, 41 billion rupees next year. So there's a big gap, what is requested and what is allocated. What is allocated is only some amount, and if we say 40% of that, we can save about 15 billion rupees. The last point I want to also is in the budget, we are going to walk our talk. You need to hire professionals and they need to be paid. They need to be paid well so that they won't go to Australia or they won't go to America or they won't go to the Middle East or Dubai. We want our professionals to work in this country. But everybody's got kids, everybody's got other commitments. If we can pay our people well, if we can give our professionals the right environment to work in, good schools, then there is no reason why they won't want to come back or stay here in this country. So when we spoke to the people who hire professionals, they told us we would like to pay them and keep them, but we have a problem because we don't get any tax breaks to pay professionals in tech companies. So we have come up with a very, very innovative mechanism. I'm going to not completely tell you what it is because I want to keep the surprise to Mangala, but we will offer an additional 35% offsetting of taxes on salary. What it really means is we did a survey, we found out for tech companies whose biggest component is salary, emoluments, that if once we apply this formula, these companies' taxes will fall even from the lowest of 14%, which is for tech companies and exports, to less than 4.5%. So at 4.5% taxes, meaning that you can pay your professionals really good salaries, we hope would help in meeting a knowledge-based, highly technical, highly competitive market economy model that we are trying to create. So, in education, I'm not going to talk about here, but STEM needs focus. And I ended with this slide. This is a classroom in Colombo, first what we call the smart classroom, where kids and teachers interact with student being the focus and learning being the focus. And we are already seeing how kids love the new technology and are willing and able to learn better than before. So with that, these are the challenges. ISL needs to take on board these challenges, come up with policies and help the government to achieve that greatness that our country can achieve together. I thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Harsha De Silva, the Deputy Minister of National Policies and Economic Affairs, a guest of honor for those words of encouragement and well-wishers. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Tim Broyd is a fellow of the ICE and also the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Royal Society of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce. He's the director of the UCL Institute for Digital Innovation in the Built Environment. A civil engineer by bachelor's and research degrees, as well as experience, Professor Broyd has worked as a practitioner and director of research and development in the industry and the public sector. He has held research, technical and corporate management roles in the industry and universities together with voluntary service on various strategic panels for government departments, research funders and universities. His interests include the combined impacts of technology and process innovations coupled with behavioral change in the development and implementation of new ways of working. Particularly, the activities areas include digital engineering, holistic understanding of sustainability of infrastructure, the development of systems approaches to infrastructure. Amongst many other things, Tim was a founder member of the UK government BIM task group. He has recently commenced chairing Water and Wastewater Resilience Action Group on behalf of the entire UK water sector. Ladies and gentlemen, for the keynote address here at these 111th annual sessions of the IESL, please welcome Professor Tim Broyd, President, Institution of Civil Engineers, London.
Let's go and things will catch up. Well, Chief Guest of Honour, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honour and a privilege to have been invited to present to you this morning at the beginning of your 111th annual meetings. As has been said, I'm Tim Broyd, and as President of the ICE, I am delighted to be here. Throughout my presidential year, I have argued that our profession is in the midst of a digital revolution where civil engineers are once again being asked to anticipate and meet changing societal needs, just like our 19th century forefathers were too. And as it was for those Victorian pioneers, the overarching aim for our profession is still to advance the science, art, and practice of engineering for the benefit of mankind. These words are written into our initial Royal Charter, which is on the screen now, dated 1828. The difference today is that the art and science of civil engineering is changing faster now than it ever has before. We are living in a world where technology will enable us to understand in real time how our assets are performing, and we will be able to intervene to maximize value for money. A world in which our industry can lead the way in innovative thinking and our firms can find new ways of adding value. A world where our industry can provide our customers with the same level and reliability of service from our infrastructure that we have come to expect from Amazon, Google, or Uber. A world where infrastructure brings economic prosperity, improves living standards, and provides a better quality of life across the globe. Excuse me, the slides have jumped. There, that's better. During all of my UK and international visits throughout my presidential year, I have called on ICE members from every corner of the globe to engineer a digital future. By this, I mean we must engineer for ourselves a complete transformation in the way we think about our infrastructure and our professional practices. A modern civil engineering industry and society requires modern systems to underpin it. I believe that building information modeling, BIM, with its continued revolutionary evolution and the approach of the UK government to embedding its use throughout the industry embodies the type of transformation needed. Well, what is BIM? It is the first truly global digital construction technology, a game changer, which is here to stay. Although the term originally referred just to buildings, this pioneering concept has evolved so that it now represents a collaborative way of working, underpinned by the digital technologies which unlock more efficient methods of designing, delivering, and maintaining physical built assets. In the UK, our government's BIM mandate has done much to raise the profile of the benefits from digital. Clients are now beginning to buy into the approach, and there is a strong sense of momentum, with the UK acknowledged as showing global leadership in the process of digital transformation of the industry. Up until now, BIM has largely been delivered as part of the design by engineering consultants and used in the delivery of projects by contractors, but not as a broader data and information management approach. BIM has been added to existing practices without really being part of an effective digital transformation strategy. We now need to think more broadly about digital systems, which embody cross-sectoral and cross-industry integration and collaboration, from the cradle to the grave, and even back to the cradle if we realize the benefits of the circular economy of infrastructure assets. The data and information we create about an asset for its whole lifetime can become a rich source of analysis. This concept has become known as the digital twin. The digital twin of a physical asset helps us to monitor and improve its performance. By realizing the value of our data resources through digital twins, we can deliver more productive infrastructure, optimize our existing assets, and enable predictive, not reactive, maintenance. And by involving many more design, technology, manufacturing, and asset management parties to collaborate at a much earlier stage than usual, the use of digital twins in the UK has cut the cost of delivering capital-built assets by around 20% over the last 5 years. It's about taking a whole life approach in order to help us realize optimal outcomes at all stages of asset life cycles. This means that all built environment professions need to be ready for change. Integration is a core theme in realizing the digital transformation of our industry and assets. New technologies can help us to work more efficiently and effectively with other professions, like planning, but also with our own teams. Digital transformation will only succeed if we also address the organizational and cultural barriers to change. This means addressing silos in our project team structures, integrating digital, technological, and data expertise as a matter of course. It also means active integration of supply chains, including the tech sector. We need to work proactively with technology providers to bring them into discussion earlier and identify the opportunities to innovate. We need to move beyond seeing digital technologies simply as tools to deliver a pre-specified outcome brought in at the end of the planning and design process. By more systematic integration of digital systems at the outset, we can identify opportunities we previously wouldn't have seen. Closer integration with the technology sector can also help us to understand and extrapolate what the future of our industry might look like. The core function may not change, but how it's realized and the balance of engineering judgment versus automation may. The most recent flagship policy report in the ICE's annual State of the Nation series, launched a few months ago, focused on digital transformation. Good infrastructure underpins thriving communities and economic growth. It enables people's day-to-day lives, creating connectivity, access to key utilities, and underpinning our social infrastructure. However, global megatrends, population growth, an aging population, greater urbanization, and increasing demands on physical and virtual connectivity are putting pressure on our infrastructure networks and assets. We cannot build our way out of these challenges. We have to do more with what we already have. Digital transformation offers a more cost-effective way of adding value to infrastructure than more traditional approaches. We must adopt new integrated digital approaches to managing and operating existing assets and building future assets. And we have to realize the value of the digital twin, the data and information we create about an asset for its whole lifetime. Perhaps surprisingly, the main recommendations of we have a problem on slide build there. Never mind, I will work through it. The main recommendations in the report weren't on technology, but rather on productivity, behaviors, and resilience. So for productivity, there is a recognized link between improving infrastructure services and increased national productivity. However, making the shift towards a more productive nation, where perhaps regional differences in productivity are addressed through improved connectivity, requires a number of intervention from government, regulators, and industry. The report set out how the UK government can use existing strategies and policies to catalyse change. It promotes a whole-life approach to regulation, which can incentivise an outcomes-based approach to infrastructure delivery, and sets out how industry must change to deliver better service. For behaviours, the pace of change in digital processes and technologies mean that those responsible for delivering infrastructure have to be more agile and adapt to change in a pragmatic way. Leadership, organisational culture, and skills within our sector will determine how we rise to this challenge. The report sets out how people, processes, and technology can be used together to optimise and secure the use of digital technology and data. It also sets out how behaviours need to change to embed a long-term approach to digital transformation. And on resilience, on one hand, digital transformation offers a route to greater resilience via greater connectivity, but it also introduces fresh security and resilience challenges which have the potential to adversely impact the performance of our assets and networks. However, it is important that these aspects of digital transformation do not act as a barrier to implementation. The report establishes methods for managing the trade-offs between improved infrastructure performance and resilience. It identifies the human and process changes required to embed a security-minded approach to infrastructure delivery and management. It also identifies areas of interdependency between different infrastructure sectors and what actions are required to align policies across different sectors. As I've said, digital transformation will only happen by all those in the infrastructure sector working together. No longer can we afford simply to say the right things about collaboration, but fall back on the old competitive models. It's time for change. Taking things back a step, all of us in this room, I'm sure, will agree that long-term infrastructure projects, be they for transport, waste, energy or housing, are absolutely essential for any economy and society. Yet in the UK, our withdrawal from the European Union has focused the attention of policymakers on the UK's productivity problems. Productivity growth in the UK construction sector, which is around 8% of the economy, have been flatlining for decades. It's not just us, this is totally in line with many other countries across Europe, North America, etc. To quote economist Paul Krugman, productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it is almost everything. The majority of investments in the UK industry are made by owners of networks, and they are all focused on securing ever higher levels of performance on existing assets and providing ever higher levels of service to their customers. Digital transformation of their operations is at the heart of their plans to achieve these goals. We know this will mean bringing in people with different skills and changing how we work. But how do we effect that change? We must do it ourselves, and we better do it quickly. And this is where an ICE-led project known as Project 13 comes in. Project 13 is different because it is led by the industry for the industry. Asset owners, not government, are taking a leadership role to drive the change, and they want to engage the entire supply chain to make that change. Our collective goal is to establish more efficient and more productive ways of working that allows everyone to benefit through better outcomes, with better designs and lower overall costs, and for everyone to make sensible margins. Some of the biggest and boldest organisations in the UK are joining us, helping us to establish the next steps. We have support from the leaders of many of the most significant infrastructure projects currently underway in the UK, such as Crossrail 2, a mainline railway going right underneath the middle of London. Highways England, the government-owned company that's responsible for our road networks, and Heathrow Airport, and you may well know of the very much